In this video, we are going to get the customers with maximum number of transactions on consecutive days. Hello, I am Jagan. I am posting this video to share my knowledge in SQL with you. If this assists you in your interview preparation anyways, I will be happy. This exercise is mainly to show how to do an order sequence with and without Windows function. Let's see the data and talk about the questions in detail. So we have a transaction table which has transaction ID, customer ID, transaction date and amount. For customer 101, we have 3 transactions and all 3 are in the consecutive days 501, 2 and 3. But for customer 102, you have 3 transactions but they are not in consecutive days. You have a break here. You have 1, 3 and 4. The 2 is missing. But for customer 105, we have 3 transactions and all are in the sequence, like consecutive days. So the maximum consecutive days is 3 days and the customers 101 and 105 has that max transaction. So the output has to be 101 and 105, the customer IDs. Let's see how to address this. First, what we need to do is for each customer, we have to sort the transactions based on the transaction ID. First, let's create the table. Okay. And comment it out. Okay. Now what we are going to do is we are going to create a sequence number for every customer based on the transaction date. For this 501 and 2, the sequence number is going to be 1, 2 and 3. And for this one, 1, 2 and 3. Same like here, 1, 2 and 3. So this is what we are trying to do. Let's see how to do that without the Windows function. Okay. So we just going to do a self join here from transactions T1. We do a self join of transactions T2 on T1 dot customer ID equal to T2 dot customer ID and T1 dot transaction date is greater than or equal to T2 dot transaction date, and then we are going to get T1 dot customer ID, T1 dot transaction date, and then we just see how many records we have based on the transaction date. Transaction date as transaction sequence. Since it's aggregate function, we just do group by 1, 2. You can say order by for order by. Okay. Let's see. So what we are trying to do, we do a self join and then we check for both the tables. Customer ID is a join field, and then we say the transaction date is greater than or equal to T2 dot transaction date, and then we are counting the transaction date. So for this record, when you say T1 of transaction date is greater than or equal to T2 dot transaction date, first one you get this record. When you go to the second one, you get the first and the second, and for the third. So when you do the count, you get 1, 2 and 3. Let's see how it goes. See, so for every customer, we have 1, 2 and 3 based on the transaction date in ascending order. Okay. Now we are going to use this as a CTE table with all data as, and then we are going to take the date difference based on the what is that, the transaction sequence. We are just going to do the date add, and then we see what's going to happen. Okay. So we just say select T dot customer ID, T dot transaction date, and then let's go to the next row. Date add is a function which use the date, and then interval we use minus transaction sequence, and it shows based on the date from the CTE table. Okay, let's see what's going to happen here. So if you see this, for 101 it's in sequence 1, 2 and 3, and the difference, the date is going to be the same, right? Because we are just take this date and -1, this date and -2, this date and -3. So if it's in sequence, then the difference of date is going to be in a same bucket. But if you see this 5, 1 and 5, 3, there is a gap. So what happens? The bucket breaks here. So the starting at 4:30 and then 3 and 4 is in different bucket, and 5, 1, 2, 3 is on the sequence. So the difference date is going to be in the same bucket, right? So if a sequence, it carries a bucket value, the same value continues, but if there is a break, then the difference is going to have a break. So we are going to use this data, and then we are going to find the bucket count. How many customer transactions are happening in the every bucket. Let's see. So we don't need the transaction date here. You can just remove this, and then we can just have a count as from all data group by one comma 2. So here what we are doing is, we are just take the customer and then the difference column as a bucket, and then count how many records are there. Now you see 101, for one bucket we have 3 records, 105 we got 3 records, but since 102 is having a break in the sequence, the 3 broke down into 1 and 2. Okay, so now we have the data and we can get the maximum transactions in the sequence, right? 3 is the maximum sequence here. So we use this as a CTE table, which is, you can say, transaction sequence as this. We are using it, and then we just say select customer ID from transaction sequence table, where the count should be equal to select max of count from the transaction sequence table. Okay, so what we are doing is, we get the customer ID and check if the count is going to be equal to the maximum count of the whole table. We don't need to have order by 2 because we have only customer ID, and we run it. So we have 101 and 102. If there are multiple transactions, then like multiple sequence for a customer, then we can have multiple times the customer just comes out. You can just get the count of it. But if you want to get the distinct of it, how many customers have the sequence of transaction, we can just say distinct of it. Okay, so based on the requirement, we can just do it. So that SQL looks like 2 or 3 steps, but when you understand the flow, it's very easy. We can just have a sequence, the first step, and then we take the date difference to create the bucket, and using that bucket we aggregate, and then we get the max of the bucket for every customer ID. So this is a normal one. So how to do that using Windows function? The same one, instead of doing the sequence here with the inner join, what we are going to do is, we are just going to create a Windows function here. Instead of count, we just say row number over partition by t1 dot to customer ID, and then order by t1 dot customer ID, t1 dot transaction date as this. So here we don't need to go with all the inner join, self joins part. So we just get the customer ID, the transaction date, and we put a row number based on every customer, and we order based on the customer and the transaction date. So let's disable this and then we run only this part and see how it works. So previously when you did a self join, we got the same output, right? So 1, 2 and 3 for every customer based on the transaction ID. So that's what we did based on the Windows function. So instead of self join, we just used single table with one Windows function, and other things are the same. If you run it, you have an error because we have this. Okay, so we get the same output. As I said, if you want to see how many times the customer ID get repeated with the sequence, then you remove the distinct. If not, you can just keep the distinct. Okay, so this data is having only 9 records, but if you want to see few more sample data, you can go to the description part of it. For example, if you go to this description, there is a link for the code. So this is GitHub. When you go here, I have a sample code. You can get the sample data from here. This is for the previous video, but for this video, when you go to the description, you can see the code in the GitHub. Hope this video helps. Thank you. Bye.